All right, so we're at like 2 minutes past. I think we can get started. 3 minutes past. Yeah,
Let's
let's
do
get
it.
started. Um, Thanks again, everyone, for joining. I'm Jan. I'm the RevOps community manager here at HubSpot. My pronouns are he and him. And for anyone with any visual impairments, I'm a white male. I'm wearing glasses and also a green t-shirt. As I've said, it's pretty sunny out in Belgium today. I'm really excited for this new workshop that we're organizing in collaborations with Aptitude 8 here. If you don't know what I'm talking about, today is the first event out of 5 that we have planned. It's we'll hold a workshop like this every other week, and we'll be looking at ways in which you can use Operations Hub to up-level or power up any other hub. And today we're getting started with Marketing Hub. And then in the next in 2 weeks we'll look at Sales Hub as well. So with us today we have CEO and founder of Aptitude 8, Connor Jeffers. Aptitude 8 is a elite solutions agency, and we're very proud to be working with them. And we also have our solutions engineer extraordinaire, Jack Coldrick, here. You probably have heard of him from past events as well. So these two are really like the cream of the crop when it comes to custom automation in HubSpot. So I'm really honored and flattered that we can have them both here today. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to what they have in store for you all. So some quick housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions for these two, please use the Q&A and use the chat for anything else. Just makes it a bit easier for us to go through the questions at the end or through this throughout this event. Also, this meeting is being recorded and will be sent to you all tomorrow, accompanied with the slides of today. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed today's event, and I'll pass it on to Connor to get it started.
Awesome. Thanks, Jan. I'm Connor. My pronouns are he, him. And for the visually impaired, I am also a white male who wears glasses. And if you have a vision of Jan, imagine a slightly chubbier and slightly more American version of Jan. And you'll be close. So really happy to have everybody here today. If you do have questions, if you have things you guys want to talk about, so the format for this event is we're going to go through some examples of things that we've built at Aptitude 8. We're an elite solutions partner, like Jan said, so we work with customers and other partners and folks in and around the HubSpot ecosystem to build stuff on Marketing Hub and Operations Hub. So we're going to take you guys through some real stuff that we've created, talk about what we do, how it works, kind of how we've solved those problems. The goal of those examples is not to share stuff about us, but to get kind of your juices flowing on cool, interesting things that you guys might want to do. So the back half of this event, Jack and I will answer questions and talk through. Here is how you would actually build something or solve a problem that you guys are trying to solve in your role. And so if you have things that come up either now or throughout the event, drop it in the Q&A. We'll try to check the chat throughout, but the Q&A is the place to go. So drop it into the Q&A and we'll talk through all of those towards the end of this. And Jack and I'll go through a whole bunch of examples. So to start, we'll first go on sort of like why marketing and Operations Hub. I won't go as much into what is Operations Hub and kind of why does it matter in the tiers. But what we'll talk about is why, if you are a Marketing Hub user, we think Operations Hub is awesome, and why, if you bring them together, you can do really cool stuff. So when we think about this, really Operations Hub helps you do kind of two things if you're a Marketing Hub customer. So one is that you can extend the power of Marketing Hub and automate things that you're struggling to automate with kind of standard out of the box tools. So maybe the HubSpot workflow tools, which are amazingly powerful, either have some limitations for your particular use case. Maybe you're trying to do something that's a little more complex than what the out of the box point and click configuration allows you to do. Or maybe you're trying to interface with things inside of HubSpot that the out of the box workflow solutions don't interact with. So Operations Hub is going to let you extend the power of those and automate anything that you can possibly imagine using the beauty of code all inside of sort of the declarative workflow builder. Additionally, Operations Hub is going to allow you to extend Marketing Hub into third-party applications. So whether that's another system, another SaaS tool that you're using, a SaaS application that has open APIs, or maybe an in-house solution that you have for your team, whether it's something you guys have custom built, or maybe a SaaS platform that you guys use internally, Operations Hub is going to let you connect to and interact with those tools. So you can extend the power of Marketing Hub significantly by using Operations Hub. So what does that mean? Why does that matter? So the reason that you would do these things ultimately is sort of the goal of RevOps overall, right? The goal is for us to break down silos between these teams, between these groups, deliver an amazing customer experience, and be able to connect all the different components of our go-to-market functions so that we can extend the value to those individual customers and give them really amazing customer experiences. So this is what we focus on as an organization and what we do kind of with HubSpot. And we think Operations Hub is a great way to do that. So let's get into some examples that we think are really, really good ones. So the first one is advanced lead scoring. So for us, this is going to be using custom behavioral events. We'll talk about kind of what those are, but these are live examples we've done for a couple of different customers that are trying to do scoring off of a little bit more complexity than maybe default sort of HubSpot properties, visit history, or some of the analytics data. So there's 3 types of custom behavioral events. So we'll go through kind of each one. There's a feature on the Marketing Hub side, and you can interact with it in really awesome ways using Operations Hub. And so we'll kind of go through each one of these. So one is sort of the app side. We can do web sort of click events and some of those pieces, and then we can manually trigger them from workflows. So we're going to go through each example, and then we'll talk about kind of what you would do with these and how you can bring them together. So let's jump forward one and talk about clicked element events. So this would be a custom behavioral event that you could fire. You could do this in your application. If you have the HubSpot tracking code, you could also do this just on your website. So let's say you want to get a custom behavioral event specifically when someone does create sign up or does a key action on one of your pages, or perhaps they go and create a trial or they start that overall journey and they've interacted with something on your core site. So you can take that event, you can grab it from that web experience, and you can send that into HubSpot and define it however you might want to. So instead of just saying this person visited this page, we can drill that down to anything that they might have clicked on your actual application. So we'll get to a couple of examples of how we could tie that together, but think about this as the core actions you do on your website. If maybe if you're B2B and you're doing sort of demo requests or contact events, maybe you want to track one of those requests. Or if you're in an e-commerce or direct to consumer, you really want to capture their interaction with one of your product pages or an add to cart action, something to that effect. And you can capture that element, send it to HubSpot, manage it with some of those custom behavioral events. The next example for us is visited URL. So maybe you want to take not just in the sort of tracking code history where you can build a list and say, in this list, people have interacted with this particular page, or power that off of a workflow, but you actually want to go deeper and say, did they visit this page? Are they interacting with this particular place? And I want to capture that event as a specific key action for something that happens in my user journey. So this could be a checkout page, a confirmation page, maybe some of your key webinars or your key virtual recorded interactions, anything that's ultra important to your overall user journey. And you want to capture the specific URL event and tag it to kind of that timeline and be able to power additional things off of that information. The last one that we really like is these manually track custom behavioral events. So this would be something you can trigger this from a workflow. So you set up a workflow inside of HubSpot. You can generate a behavioral event directly from HubSpot itself. And that's going to allow you to do something like when someone does a demo request, or maybe you want to capture their MQL event. Something we run into really often is folks say, hey, I have this life cycle stage for marketing qualified lead, but what I want to do is capture every time that they become that, or every time that they hit a particular status or criteria in my user journey. And we can generate those behavioral events to say, cool, this person has had an MQL event 5 times over this particular history. And you can start to weave all of these together to build really, really interesting interactions that you can start to manage a lot of those scoring criteria with. So for example, these will all come together and you can report on these. If we jump forward one, you can analyze all of them. You can look at all of your events. You can store all of these different event criteria. This will allow you to both do attribution reporting, report builder, all of these different pieces inside of here to be able to drill down on and understand what events are driving key actions in your overall marketing lifecycle. And you can start to weave these together across wherever you're capturing those events. You're not limited to just one particular action. You could be sending those in from sort of your application or straight from web as well. So in terms of some of the technical instructions for different operations hub actions, and then we're going to get into some examples of how you could really do this with some custom code. One for your web analytics, if you wanted to use the events on the front end sort of API, you're going to grab those, you're going to embed that code on your site. You'll fire that information into the web analytics API to generate those behavioral events for page views or for particular interactions. You can use your workflows to generate those events. And if you do go in and expand this with some of those custom coded actions, so if you're trying to fetch interactions from your application or something else that might be happening in your app, then you can do that on Operations Hub. And the only sort of limit that you may run into there is 20-second runtime on the Operations Hub coded action. So by using these events, you can do really advanced journeys, really advanced ways of reporting on those life cycles and sort of weaving those different steps together. And you sort of set these up with those pieces. And I know someone asked about having the recording. We'll send that to folks as well. Also, someone that said I talk fast. I apologize. I will do my best to slow down. It is one of my worst weaknesses, which I apologize. Our next example, if you do have follow-up questions on this as well, throw them into the Q&A and we can touch on those at the tail end and expand on them also. And I'll try to go a little slower here. The next example for sort of how to power up some of this is cleaning inbound leads. So something we hear a lot, and we'll go through some key examples of how you could use Operations Hub to do this, is you get leads from a variety of different sources. So this could be someone filling out a form on your site, and maybe you're only capturing an email address, or maybe you're getting wrong information from some of their other fields, or perhaps you're getting data and you're importing lists, or you're getting information from different sources, and you want to be able to clean and enrich and add additional information to those records. And using a custom coded action, you'll be able to extend HubSpot and be able to sort of do quite a bit more there. So I'm going to pass it to Jack, and we're going to let Jack actually run through how you would do this in Operations Hub and how you can actually set this up.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Connor. So what I'll do is I'll share my screen and we'll run through this. So in a moment, you should hopefully see my screen coming into view. So I think one of the most important things for really any marketer out there is an email address, because ultimately that is how you are going to communicate with your target audience. However, email addresses aren't always valid, syntactically correct. There can be errors. They may be risky, i.e. they may have firewalls in front of them. They may be role-based addresses, and it can create all sorts of complexities when it goes to running marketing campaigns. So one interesting way of leveraging Operations Hub in conjunction with Marketing Hub is to implement some sort of email validation with a third party. So what you'll see here, for example, is a list of contacts in my system, my CRM, and you'll see I have different fields or different columns here displaying information relating to their provided email address. Now, it's worth noting that these contacts could have come in via form submission. Of course, you may implement some sort of front-end email validation on the form, but they could have also been imported into the system off the back of a trade show or a conference. They could have been manually added by users. So there's lots of different ways these contacts can get here, but we want to ensure the integrity of those email addresses. And you'll see here a couple of examples. We can see whether this email is a throwaway. Is it a disposable address? Is it a free address? You'll see my own one there is a free address with Gmail. What's the reason that this email may be marked as risky or deliverable? Is it a role-based address, like a support at, a sales at, a marketing at email address? Now, all of this information is coming from a third party called Kickbox, which is an email verification service. There are a lot more out there. This doesn't only have to be achieved with Kickbox. And of course, you can enrich data from other systems as well. But let's actually look at how this is done and how all of this works. Now, if we were to create a contact, for example, so I'm going to maybe just create, I might choose, let's just say, I just bought a Nintendo Switch actually. So I'll go with Mario at Nintendo, Nintendo.com. Okay, and we're just going to put him in as Super Mario, and we're going to create that contact. Now you can see here, Super Mario is there in the CRM. And at the moment, we're waiting for this data to populate. So if we give it a second or two and we refresh this page, we should see some data coming back in from Kickbox. Now, it might take a second or two. We'll refresh again. We'll come back to it in a moment, but let's actually look at how that data is getting in here. When this contact was added to the system, a workflow was triggered off the creation of this contact, and we executed some custom code to query a third-party service and enrich the data or pull that data back into the system. Refresh now before we go back here. You'll see here, Super Mario. Okay, he's fictional, so obviously he's not going to have an email address. But if he did, it would be a risky one to email. So we don't want to target him with campaigns. Let's actually look at how we did that. So you'll see here, I've got a workflow here, a contact-based workflow, and it's triggered when anytime a contact is created. This could be triggered off of form submissions. It could be triggered off of contacts maybe that you haven't emailed in a certain amount of time or haven't engaged with your brand in a certain amount of time. You can get as creative as you like. But arguably the most important part of this workflow is this custom coded action. And if we click into this custom coded action, you'll actually see an interface like this. Now I'll zoom in a little bit so this is a little easier to see. And it's from within here that we can actually build out the logic to perform some sort of bespoke process for our business. In this case, querying Kickbox to verify this email address. There's a couple of things to keep in mind with these custom coded actions. The first thing is you can choose to build these in JavaScript, it's Node, or you can choose to use Python if you prefer. That's just a preference at the end of the day. You can add various secrets. Secrets are things like API keys, passwords, usernames, things that you wouldn't necessarily like to be visible within the code, but you would like to reference. So in my case, my API key to query Kickbox. We can also choose to use some properties that relate to the contact that's currently enrolled in the workflow. So in this case, I'm querying or validating an email address. So the email address is very important. But equally, if I was maybe validating a phone number, you can see here I could choose the contact's mobile or landline number, and I could choose to use that within my custom code as well. Now, what you then have down here is the canvas on which you can build out your logic. Now, HubSpot will give you a template in order to build upon. But the reality is you're free to get as creative as you like and scale this out as needs be. But roughly in terms of structure, what you can expect to see is at the very top, you'll import the library that you want to use. In this case, we're using the request library so that we can query a third party. We have on line number 5 here, a function which just contains some logic that will be executed. And then within the function from line 7 right down to line 36, we have the logic that is actually being run. So you'll see here what I'm doing is I'm getting a reference on line 9 to their email address. On line 12, I'm actually then building my request. So it's I'm getting some information from Kickbox using their APIs. I'm including my API key off the back of that. And then naturally, I will get a response. And what I'm doing here is I'm parsing the data that's being sent back to me. And then, of course, what I need to do is pass that data back to the workflows that I can leverage it. So you can see here we have this callback. So any information that I get sent back from this service, I can then pass back to the workflow and reference further on. And that's in fact what I'm doing. If I was to cancel this, you'll see here what I'm doing is I'm actually copying the information that was returned into those custom properties that we would have seen originally when we were looking at the CRM. And you'll even see if we scroll down, let's just say this email was a good or valid email, or maybe it was not a good email, it was a bad or undeliverable email. I could choose to branch out accordingly. So maybe if this was a bad email, I might have a custom coded action to delete the contact. I might set a property to flag the contact as such. I might add them to a suppression list, something along those lines. But ultimately, the data that comes back, apologies, the data that comes back is free for us to use within the CRM. And this could be used, as I said, to preserve the reputation when it comes to your email deliverability, your IP and domain reputation. It can help to reduce the likelihood of soft and hard bounces, and ultimately, in the long run, play an important role in your email health and the success of your marketing campaigns. Again, there's lots of ways that this can be used. There's lots of systems that can be integrated in this fashion, but I just wanted to give you a flavor of what's possible. And if anyone is interested, what I'll do is I'll put it in the chat in a moment. I've got a ton of examples of how you can use these custom coded automation. These are from workshops we ran last month. The slide deck there is there for you to follow along. The code is there if you'd like to take a look at it and use it. There's also, each of these is an hour-long recording where we actually build this end-to-end and go into a lot more detail. So I'll be sure to share that in the chat. But yeah, hopefully that just gives you a flavor and a sense of what this looks like in the flesh. And maybe I'll hand it back to you, Connor. No problem.
I think one of the things that I'll add on to that, and then we'll jump into another example of how this can be tied all together, is some of what Jack showed where you're using that workflow and you're able to weave between the code and the declarative actions. We really see this as one of the main advantages of the way HubSpot chose to implement Operations Hub, is that you can use some of those declarative functions and then also the custom code. So it's maintainable by somebody who's not necessarily an engineer or developer. And so that's something I think is really awesome that I would capture as well. I know I saw something in the Q&A for somebody saying, how can I learn a lot of this JavaScript? If you're in an operations function or you're in a marketing function and you're trying to use some of these, figuring out what you want to build, working with a developer like Jack or somebody else to help you actually code that piece of it, you can then extend it and maintain it with declarative functionality inside of the workflow, which is super awesome. We think that that's a really scalable way to build a lot of these tools. So we're going to go to another example here, and I'm going to try my absolute darndest to go slow on this one because it is a little complicated. But our example for this one is automatically generating a data model inside of HubSpot using a CSV integration and using Operations Hub to parse kind of an import. So the reason for this, and we'll talk about this. So this is an example. It's a real customer that we worked with. We did a Marketing Hub implementation for them. And this business does vacation property management at a pretty large scale. And their business is they kind of go through these core processes. So one is that everything that they start working with starts with appraisals. So whenever there's a new appraisal in the market, so appraisals happen when people buy property, when they sell property, when they do new listings. Every time an appraisal happens, it's going up onto the MLS, and MLS is the big database of all of the real estate properties in the United States and by region. It gets really messy. But the purpose here is that every time that there's a new appraisal, it generates a new listing. So what this customer wanted to do is to be able to take new appraisals, new MLS data that's coming into this database, and they wanted to automatically reach out to all of those property owners and sell them on their services. So messaging could either be, hey, you just bought a new property, we would love to manage it for you. Or it could be, hey, we're seeing that you're selling your property. Are you selling it because it's a really hard thing to maintain and manage? And is there something that we could be managing for you? And so the whole premise here is that they could have this data automatically running and then leverage the power of HubSpot Marketing Hub to automatically email and communicate with those property owners and tell them things about their property, which would say, hey, Jack, I saw you just listed your $10 million vacation home in Park City, Utah. The HubSpot stock must have been great. Would you want to do managed services with us? Here's sort of the packages we have that match your property, your location. And so that particular solution was something that they couldn't do for two reasons. One is they didn't have API access to the MLS, and they also needed to build a whole data model. So they were getting daily exports. So they would get a CSV export from the MLS every day. And the problem is that CSV had data about the properties. It had data about the real estate agent, data about the property location, and it was this massive spreadsheet. And so in order to do this effectively, we needed to create a whole bunch of different objects in their system, right? So we needed a property object, we needed an agent object, we needed an owner object, we needed a way to kind of link all these things together, but they only had that one CSV file. So what we did for this example, so we'll jump forward one here, and then I'll go through kind of how we ended up building this. So we created a custom coded action on Operations Hub inside of HubSpot so that they could just import this file. And then similar to sort of what Jack showed, where the criteria would be, created in the system, we then took every single object that was imported and we ran it through our custom action. And so this allowed us to do some really cool stuff. So one is that we could automatically create those listing agents, update listing agents that we may have already had in our system, automatically find out Does that person exist? Do we need to update them? Are we creating a duplicate? We could automatically link all of those records together. So we could have agents associated with all of the properties that they're actually listing, as well as with all the properties where there may be a buy-side agent using flexible association labels. And the real value of this is we're automatically creating this big complex data model where they can do really advanced marketing functionality. But if we jump forward one, this whole custom coded action runs on a custom object we built that's just an import object. And so all they do is they come to HubSpot, they hit import, they import that file once, they hit save. The coded action runs and it automatically looks up for any duplicates. It finds any records that already exist. It relates all of the records together automatically so that they can do all of their downstream marketing automation journeys without having to really manage this upstream component. And so this process we've seen really similar, whether anytime you're importing a CSV that maybe has multiple data elements can get really complicated. And so this lets you do this in a really, really easy way. We've seen this deployed for things like oh man, the word is escaping me. If you're doing content syndication, if you're doing content syndication or you're getting sort of lists of records from anywhere, this would allow you to do a whole bunch of those. So the way that this works is whenever the import object is created inside of HubSpot, our custom coded action runs and it goes and finds out which fields in that import file relate to the deal record, which records relate to the listing, what fields relate to the property, what are the contacts, and then it all automatically creates those records, links them all together, and populates that data model automatically. So what the user gets as the output is their experience is they come in, they import a CSV. The output is here's these deals that are auto-created. Here's all of the agents that are associated with this deal. Here's the property. So this 122000645 is that import record. And it's auto-generating all of the contacts, the owners, the listing agents, the properties, all of that's automatically created. And then they can use the marketing automation functionality native to say, send an email to every person that's related to this property record with a label of listing agent, an email that says, hey, we saw you just listed a property. Here's the property name. We'd love to get in touch with you. Here's our company. Here's what we do. And so using this, these guys are getting 50% open rates on all the emails that they're sending out. And it's automatic. So instead of previously they were scraping all of those listings, having sales agents reach out to all of those people, now they're just taking that CSV, dumping it into HubSpot, and HubSpot is automatically prospecting and interacting with and driving marketing automation to all of these different folks. So super, super powerful ways that you can be leveraging Operations Hub for all of your marketing functionality. So what we're going to do is we're going to pivot to questions. So if you guys have questions on less of can Operations Hub do this, we're more than happy to answer those. But Jack and I have the whole half hour, and we'd love to live solution some problems you guys are trying to solve. Tell us about what you're doing, how you're doing it, and where you're kind of getting stuck and what you're trying to do. So Jack, I might let you take first pass only because I've been talking. I think you've been looking at some of these, and then I can jump into one or two of them after you.
Absolutely. So I was answering, there's some great questions coming in as you were going through all of that, Connor. And thank you for your questions, and we welcome more of them. We have a few in the chat right now. There's two from Grayson. And I think, Connor, these are probably better for you to answer because they're linked specifically to the solution you just went through. But the first one was when you linked agents to properties, was that a custom object to custom object association?
Yeah. So Grayson, what we did there is we actually used the flexible association labels. And so all of the listing agents, whether they're a purchasing or a selling agent, are in HubSpot as contacts. And then we created properties as companies. And so one agent can be associated to multiple different companies by using that flexible association label. And then we're using company workflows to say, send an email to all the contacts related to this company with the association label of buying agent, for example. And that's sort of how that automation is functioning. So those are all standard objects. To extend on your second question here, which is, can you clarify what you mean by import object? And if you created a custom object just for importing? The answer is yes. So what we did is we created an object in HubSpot that users don't even interact with. It's not related to anything. It's kind of a back-end functionality. But instead of them having to figure out, okay, I need to import this list, I need an ID to look up to a contact, and they have to do a lot of complex lookups and managing some of those relationships, they could take that one file and they could import that file into HubSpot, and it would automatically generate all of the right data and update the records that already exist using unique keys, which would be like the address, the email address, anything that might tell you which record that is. And you could use a super similar concept for an order file, maybe an export from an ERP, lots of different ways to sort of use that same framework to create and populate data in a really nice way.
And there's one other question there, just from Rebecca, that relates to CSV. Can the CSV and or custom coded functions work with products as well? Maybe I'll take that one. So I'd say there, Rebecca, first of all, you can absolutely import products into the HubSpot product library via CSV. There's no problem there. When it comes to custom coded actions, though, they are reliant on being housed within a workflow. Now, it's not possible to trigger workflows using the product object alone. But what people will often do is products are linked to deals as line items. So you might have a deal workflow that is triggered when it meets a certain criteria. Let's just say, for argument's sake, a deal is closed won. And what you could actually do in that custom coded automation is you could look at the associated products or line items and do what you like with them. I suppose maybe you want to create an entry in an external database. Maybe you want to perform some sort of check to make sure this deal is categorized as an XYZ deal, whatever the case may be. So you certainly can interact with the data, but the key thing is just to be mindful of the types of workflows that are going to actually trigger the action itself.
I'm going to touch on some of the ones that you may have answered in here and give maybe a different take on some of them that I think that there may be ways to solve for. So the first one that I see in here is from Cameron Evans, which is trying to calculate a custom conversion rate, MQL to deal, and the default funnel reports don't cut it. Can Ops Hub and data sets, workflows, or coding help count MQLs and deals and come up with a conversion rate calculation? So ways that we've done that, I actually think that custom events that we were talking about is a way that we've done that historically, which is that you can generate events when those key actions happen, and then you can report on those events. So you could look at how many MQL events did I have sort of in this period, and then how many deal events did I have in the same period, for instance, and sort of start to calculate ratios there. Similarly, you could do that as isolating to individual contacts or records. So of the contacts that had an MQL event in this period, how many of those had a deal event? And you could use the report builder on some of those events to stitch some of that together, which is something that we've done a couple of times for sort of similar type of use cases. So you shouldn't need a coded action to do that necessarily. You just sort of have to architect what events you care about, and then start to build some of those and build reporting off of those events to sort of track anything custom you might want. That custom event functionality is really great for a lot of that you might be trying to do. The next one, I think you answered as well, Jack, but I'll touch on a little from Liam, which is right now for missed calls to our company, we use Zapier and webhooks to create a contact in HubSpot so that our team can call back. Can Operations Hub replace Zapier for that example? So Jack already touched on this a little bit, which is that Operations Hub is really good when the data is triggering inside of HubSpot. That being said, I think that there may be a beta. I've at least seen something of being able to receive webhooks on the HubSpot side. A way I know you can do that with absolute certainty is with a serverless function in HubSpot. That is a CMS Hub enterprise feature. So that's kind of where that sits. I think that there's work being done to make that available in like a workflow, for instance. But you could receive a webhook and then you could generate all the same data downstream. And Operations Hub is great at replacing a lot of things that Zapier does, but it's best when the action is actually triggered out of HubSpot as opposed to from somewhere else and then sent into HubSpot. So Jack, I don't know if there's one that's on here that you want to take, or I can start scrolling through some also.
So there is one there just in relation to the behavioral events. So by Mitch, who mentions that, yes, we have released a new beta version of behavioral events, and it has a lot of powerful functionality. One of the biggest ones is that you can now use these custom events in your attribution reports to understand maybe, how much revenue they're influencing or how much leads they're helping to generate, amongst other things. You can also use them in delays and workflows, but it's true, there is some parity in the features when you compare it with the legacy version, and it will take time. It is in beta still for it to match what we were used to in the legacy version. But you're right, with the legacy behavioral events, you did have the ability to simply just create an event, and you could choose to trigger off the back of a form submission, and you could just choose the form from a drop-down, and it was nice and simple. Admittedly, that's not available in the current beta with behavioral events. One way that you could achieve it, however, is you could create a workflow that enrolls a contact who fills a form, and the custom coded action would just contain the JavaScript snippet to actually execute the event. I appreciate it's somewhat of a workaround, but right now that is probably the simplest way to do that. Alternatively, what you could choose to do is you can actually, if you're embedding these forms on your website, you can actually customize the form embed code. Not a lot of people are aware of this, but the embed code that you place has handlers attached to it that you can add more logic to. So you could listen for when that form is submitted, and you could actually execute the event that way. Again, I appreciate it's a little bit more steps, but right now they would be the best and easiest ways to do that.
Sweet. Thorough, excellent. Nothing to add on that one for sure. Clarifying question from Stephanie Wilcox, which is, can external objects properties that don't have the same name as what lives in HubSpot? So for example, external could say contact loan number, and in HubSpot, it may say deal loan number, and the data will flow from one to another in the correct spot. So I think that this is asking in relation to the real estate example where you could sort of import a bunch of loans. We actually did something similar to that for another customer, which was around, I think it was trades on like a trading platform, if I recall, but similar concept. So yes, so whatever your data model is in the system that you're maybe migrating information from doesn't need to match the same naming convention in HubSpot. And one of the big problems that we typically solve at the front end of any kind of integration systems design type project is really getting a handle on what should the data model be and what are the best objects in HubSpot to actually use, right? So for a loan number, you might want loans as deals because they have different stages and statuses, and you want to manage those in a pipeline. And whatever the objects are from the other system that you're sort of putting into HubSpot don't need to match one-to-one, but you will need to figure out kind of what data model do you want in HubSpot, what data model is going to best help you achieve your goals, and then how does the system in where you're migrating things over, what data should it get mapped over to? So those don't need to match at all. It's totally okay if they're separate. It's not at all an issue.
There was as well, Connor. I think Brant actually, who works in the real estate space, has mentioned it already. And I'm by no means an expert here, so I'll happily take your lead. But in terms of is it opt-in friendly from a marketing perspective? I think Brant mentioned that most MLSs have an opt-in option anyway. But maybe that's one worth.
Yeah, that one is candidly is outside of our wheelhouse. So we're not a marketing agency. We're all sort of building things and creating operations and these other pieces. And so the customer's deciding who they want to message and how they want to message it. I think what Brant's saying is correct, which is the data source they're pulling it from is public. And so all they're doing is parsing it and then reaching out to folks off of those. And obviously laws and rules and opt-ins and CCPA and GDPR all vary region by region and market by market. And so there's tremendous nuance there. So by no means am I saying import a big list to HubSpot and just start emailing everybody. I would not recommend you do that. But it definitely is based around what particular problem you're solving and what that data set is. And the example for us is more of here's a way that you could take sort of a CSV and make it really easy to generate and populate a data model off of that. those are the ones that we had submitted and answered, guys. If anyone has anything else, please throw it into the Q&A. We'd love to continue chatting with folks while we're waiting for people. If we jump to our next slide here, Jack and I, we'll keep answering things also. So we're not kicking you off. Please submit a Q&A. But Jack posts tons of amazing stuff on LinkedIn. He's got operations hub guides. He's incredible, true expert. Highly recommend connecting with him and following him. And if you guys are working on any of these problems for your organizations, or you'd like to chat with us about it, I'm incredibly accessible. Hit me up on LinkedIn, send me an email. We'd love to work with you. If you're interested in working on some of these problems, we're also always hiring. So if any of this is exciting to you, I'd love to talk to you in whatever format is interesting to you. Shoot me a note, hit us up on LinkedIn for sure.
And actually, to add to that as well, Connor, I would say I'm kind of transitioning into a slightly different role within HubSpot in the next week, where I'll be focusing solely on Operations Hub and our CMS for that matter. But please, if anyone out there does want to ask about Operations Hub potentially being a fit, my email is there, so I'd be more than happy to give some insights. And as Connor mentioned, feel free to connect on LinkedIn, and maybe we can have even a more informal conversation there. But would love to be of assistance if I can. Jack's
awesome. Can't recommend Jack on LinkedIn. A+ follow. I try to be as fun as and interesting as Jack. But feel free to reach out. We'd love to talk to you guys. Jan, we have more of these. Jan, I can let you promo those if you'd like, as we're waiting, if you want to jump in and give it to him.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to remind folks that this is the first event in the workshop series that we're doing with Aptitude 8. The next one is called Power Up Sales Hub with Operations Hub, and it takes place, I think, at the same time, but in 2 weeks. So that's April 7th. So I put the link in the chat if you're interested. Click that link, and yeah, I'm excited to see what you guys come up with, because I mean, you blew my mind a couple of times during the session.
Come to our other ones. We'll talk about more stuff. We'll do. I think we're doing. Are we doing all the hubs? We're doing every hub.
I think so. We're probably also. Sweet. We were planning on rounding off with like the entire, like what if we combine?
What if you had everything?
What if, yeah.
You should have everything. Having everything's great. I highly recommend it. You can do really cool stuff, but come to our future sessions. We'll do more of these and bring questions, bring concepts. We'd love to talk to you guys about also all of them. Jan, Megan's asking, where is the schedule and how do I get on the mailing list?
Yeah, getting on our mailing list. Let me pull that up. I have the link here somewhere. Yeah. So this is, if you want to sign up for our newsletter, you also get all of the emails that I'm sending to invite people. So that's the link to our newsletter. Sign up there and you'll receive all of our updates. And also just by visiting our community, I'll put that link in the chat too. I'm promoting everything there as well. So yeah.
Come hang out with us.
We'd love core to see places. It. Yeah.
Cool.
So I think should we call it here and continue in 2 weeks?
I'm good to call it. We can give the last 30 seconds if anyone wants to do a final question. Other than that, I think we're good to call it. Jan, thank you so much for having us and putting this together. Jack for joining us from Ireland as well, and we look forward to seeing folks very soon.
Good stuff. Thanks everybody.
Thanks everyone, and see you next time.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye all.